Jmath.
Now let's look at a few trickier sums where things don't always go to plan. So what I mean with that is sometimes in real life, people can't pay back their loans every time. If you think back to COVID, where so many people lost their jobs, they had to make arrangements with the bank, or any of those circumstances can happen, and you can get questions regarding those circumstances. So let's have a look at a few. So in this video, we're going to discuss 3 different scenarios that can happen, and I'll give you all the notes that you need to know exactly what to do if you get a question like this. So the first one we're going to look at is if someone makes an investment and they just leave the money in the account for a few years after their last payment. So let's look at question 1. Sam wants to buy a PlayStation 5, which costs 12,000 Rand. He starts immediately and saves 865 Rand each month for a year in an account that gives interest of 7% compounded monthly. He then leaves the money in the bank for a further 6 months without adding any money. Will he be able to buy his PS5 in 18 months? Okay, so what's very important here, there's 2 parts to this question. The first 12 months is one part, and then he leaves the money in the account for the second part, for 6 months. So let's start with the first part. He saves monthly. So I know it's the future value formula. We need to work out what he saved after 1 year, so I don't know that. I know X is 865. I know N is going to be 12 months, but big red lights, they use the word immediately. And if you see that, it must be, so they told me it's 12 months. I need to add an extra month to compensate for that immediately. So remember, if someone starts to save or starts to pay back a loan, the normal standard is to do it at the end of the month. So between T0 and T1, there's a gap where nothing happens. The payment is at the end of the month. Except if someone says they want to start paying immediately, then there's actually a payment at T0 and at T12. So that gives me 13 payments in that 1 year. So don't miss that one if you see the word immediately. I know I is 0.07 over 12. So now I can just sub into the future value formula and see what he was able to save in 12 months. So according to my calculator, in 12 months, he could save 11,647,11719 and so forth. Okay, so it's not the final answer, so I can't round off yet. Okay, so this poor guy can't buy his PlayStation 5 in 1 year. So let's see if he might have enough after another 6 months. But in the story, the payments stop now. For some reason, he couldn't invest further. So now we're just going to use the compound formula with this amount that he could save and see what it's worth after 6 months. So I'm just going to say my A value is going to be equal to 11,647.11 dot dot dot. So I'm just keeping it on my calculator, and I'm just going to add the interest. So 1 plus 0.07 over 12 for 6 months. So I'm not multiplying, it's not 72 months. I'm just leaving it as a 6. And according to the calculator, this guy has barely enough, but he can buy his PlayStation because he saved up 12,060 Rand, 76 cents. So remember to answer the question, will he be able to buy? Yes, Sam can buy his PlayStation 5. So now we get to another advanced sum, which they love asking in grade 12 papers. So that's if someone has a loan, but they don't start to pay the loan immediately. So the bank gets a bit agitated and they add interest before this guy even starts paying because he broke the agreement. So let's see how we would go about solving this. So we call this deferred payments or missing payments before a loan. So firstly, you need to add interest. And we're just going to use the normal compound formula with the loan amount and interest for the months that he actually missed. So when we know the new amount that he still owes the moment he starts paying, we can then use the present value formula to answer whatever they are asking me. Most of the time, they are asking me what should X be so that this person can finish his loan in the allotted time frame. So let's look at question 2, which I would say is a level 4 question. Quite complicated, but let's go. Mike sees an advert on TV that says you can buy a new Suzuki Swift today and only start paying in 6 months' time. The price of a new vehicle is 240,000, and a dealership will give you an interest rate of 19% per annum compounded monthly. And you have 6 years to pay the money back. How much will Mike pay extra if he starts paying in 6 months versus starting at the end of the first month? So very interesting question, but it's a very big question because now you need to do 2 separate sums to compare the answers and see what he would have saved if he just didn't take their deal. So firstly, let's do the one if he starts paying at the end of the first month. So in this case, I can just sub into the present value formula. So we can make the list. We know the loan needs to be 240,000. We are going to work out X. We know I is going to be 19% compounded monthly. And the time frame they give me is 6 years. So 6 times 12 equals 72. So I can just fill that into the present value formula and work out what is X. According to my calculator, his monthly payment will then be 5,610 Rand 0.41. Okay, so this is actually one of the questions to compare with the other one, so I can round off to 2 decimal places. So now we know what he would have paid if he just stuck to a normal loan and started paying on day one. Let's just see what happens if he only starts in 6 months' time. So for this, I would suggest to draw a little timeline, like you can see on the screen. So read very carefully. They say he can start paying in 6 months' time. Now, if that happens, there was a payment between month number 5 and month number 6, because remember, it's at the end of the month, so there was a payment. But that means he missed 5 payments. Now, the bank is not your friend if you don't pay them when you said you would. So they are going to add interest for those 5 months. And that would be step 1 to this question. So I'm just going to say A, or the new present value, would be equal to what he borrowed, and then 5 months worth of interest that they added. So 0.19 over 12 to the power 5. So then my calculator says at the end of these 5 months, he owes them 259,611.2687 dot dot dot. Okay, so now we know by the moment he started to repay, month number 6, he owed that amount. So now I'm just going to sub into the present value formula again to figure out what his increased payments would have needed to be in order to also pay it off on month 72, because what the advert didn't tell you is they're not going to extend your payment period with 6 months if you wait 6 months to start. You must finish this by the end of 6 years. So he's going to pay a lot more than the 5,600 in option 1. So I would just make my list again. I know what the present value or the loan amount would be. I am going to work out what x needs to be. I know what I is, 0.19 over 12. So now n in this case is also not just 72. Okay, so I'm going to take the same approach that I take with sigma. I'm going to say top minus bottom plus 1. So 72 minus 6 plus 1 is going to equal 67 payments that he has left to pay off this loan with his increased amount. So let's just sum in the formula and see what x is going to be. And according to the calculator, his new x value is going to be 6314.69. Okay, so you can see there's a big increase in what he's actually going to have to pay per month. But now remember, we still need to answer their question. So they're asking me, how much more would Mike pay in this second option versus the first option? So what we actually then have to do is we need to take the x value multiplied by the time he took to pay it, and then compare those two values. So let's just see how that would look. As you can see, with option 1, he would pay a grand total for this vehicle of 403,949 Rand. But if he waits 6 months and then earn all those extra interest, he's actually going to pay back 423,084 Rand, which gives you a difference of 19,134 Rand and 74 cents that it cost him because he waited 6 months to start paying. So the moral of the story, if you borrow money, start paying back immediately. Otherwise, it's going to cost you in the end. And the final type of question that you can get with missed payments, this is the big one. Okay, so let's read the story and then we can look at the steps. Grant takes out a 20-year home loan for 1.5 million Rand. He repays it in monthly installments of 15,500 and the interest rate is 11% compounded monthly. Unfortunately, he has financial troubles and cannot pay for month 123, 124, and 125. He arranges with the bank to increase his existing payments to settle the loan after 20 years. What is his new installment? Okay, that is quite a mouthful and an entire story about poor Grant's situation, but let's see how you would solve this mathematically. Firstly, I would draw a timeline. So please look and inspect the timeline and let's talk about it. So I'm going to break it up into 3 parts. The first part of the story, everything went well. He could pay his monthly amount. The bank was happy. Grant was happy. Everything went well. So then in the middle, he had trouble and he missed a few payments. Okay, so then X was 0 for that part. So when that happens, I can't use present value or future value. I need to use the compound formula of grade 11. But before I can do that, I need to figure out what did he owe in month 123 when he missed the first payment, because that would be my p-value for that compound sum. Okay, so as you can see, part 2 in the steps there. I need to take the outstanding balance and then give that a compound bracket for the amount of months that he missed his payments. Then part 3, after I have that value, I can then go back to my normal present value formula and work out what x should be to finish at the right time. Okay, guys, so a sum like this would be in total between 8 and 10 marks. It can be really complicated, but if you follow those steps, you can break it up and get your 10 marks or 8 marks. Let's do this. Okay, so part 1, we need to look at the first section, so month 0 to month 122, and then work out the outstanding balance after the 122nd payment was made. So let's just make a list of what we know and then sub it into the massive outstanding balance formula. So we know the loan was for 1.5 million rand. Okay, we know that X was 15,500. We know I was 11%, it was compounded monthly, and we now know N is 122 months. Now remember, I don't multiply that by 12, otherwise that's going to give me into the decades. Don't want to go there, just keep it at 122. Now I can sub it into the outstanding balance formula. And so I hope by now you've written it down and you know this formula, because you're definitely going to get an outstanding balance question. So let's just fill in and see what we have. And so you can choose if you want to just type it in one shot on the calculator, but I know many people would rather do it step by step to just make sure if something goes wrong, you don't lose all your marks. So the first section would be 4566302.776 dot dot dot, and then the second section would be 3456559.493 dot dot dot. If I subtract those two, I get that the outstanding balance, sure, this person paid half of his loan and he still owes 1.1 million. Okay, but that is real life. The first part of a home loan is always just interest. And then only in the last half does it go a bit better. Okay, so that's his outstanding balance after month 122. So now the second part of the story is when he could not make the payment. So now we need to add interest, sadly, to see how much he owes when he can start paying again. So that is just a normal compound formula sum. So I'm just going to say for the second part of this question that I know my A value is what I want to work out, but I know the P value is this 1109743.28 dot dot dot, and I'm going to add the 3 months that is missing. Okay, so luckily in the question they make that very clear that it's only 3 months. Sometimes if they give you dates and things, it can get complicated. So they only missed 3 months. My calculator tells me that the amount after those 3 months will just be 1140541.8259. Okay, great. So now in the story and on my timeline, I'm now at the end of month 125. Now things are going better again and he can make his monthly payments. So to finish the story, I need to use the present value formula and work out what is X. So let's just go for a list again, just to sum up what we have at this stage. We now know what the new present value is going to be. We need to work out what X is. I still stays the same as 0.11 over 12, and N is now the time remaining. So I'm just going to say 240 minus 126, 240 minus 126 plus 1, and that would give me 115 months that this person has left to pay. Now I'm just going to sub into the present value formula and figure out what is X. My calculator tells me his new monthly payment will be 16,088 Rand and 53 cents. Okay, guys, that was a mouthful. Like I said, this could be 8 to 10 marks in a final exam. Please make sure you know all the steps, you study the steps. I hope you don't see this question in a paper, but you need to be prepared if it comes your way.
If this video helped you, please like and subscribe.
Jmath.